Are you looking for the fastest way to destroy your car and spend a ton of money doing it? Look no further than drifting. You've just watched Tokyo Drift for the 347th time like a real car guy, and you finally decided that you want to try out that drifting thing, but you have no idea where to start. We've got you covered. We're going to take you through everything you need to build the starter drift car of your dreams. The first thing you want to take a look at is the platform you're going to build. It used to be that the Nissan 240SX was the perfect choice for this. Problem being that now these older Nissans have fallen into collector car territory and have gotten wildly expensive. You can still build a 240SX, but realistically, as prices go up, this becomes less of a great option. The cars don't make a ton of power, coming with either a single cam or twin cam KA24 truck engine. They make around 100, 150 horsepower when they were new 30 years ago. Now you're probably looking at 75, little ponies, not full-size horses. Realistically, if you buy this car, you're probably going to tear it down to a bare shell and spend the next 5 years rebuilding it from the ground up. It seems like every 240 build never actually gets finished and just gets passed around half done to half done. Even though parts are cheap and plentiful, this is probably not the best starter drift platform. So what is a better choice? Well, I got a couple cars for you here. First, we're going to talk about one that you probably have guessed, the Nissan 350Z. People call this thing basically the modern 240SX, powered by a VQ35, VQ37, VQ ABC123. There's a lot of these. Any of the 350Zs are going to work. The cool thing about these cars is that they come with everything you need out of the box. They've got decent power at around 287 horsepower. They've got some torque. They come with a nice 6-speed manual transmission, either the CD009 or the one that no one wants. And you've got an LSD in some of the models like the Track. They are absolutely bulletproof. You can bang these things off limiter all day. They're dirt cheap, like $3 to $5 grand. Just find your local takeover special that's missing the front and rear bumper. You can get one, like I said, with that VQ, with a manual transmission, ready to rip. If you blow it up, engines are like $600 because the VQ came in everything from like the Altima all the way up to like the Murano. It was used in every Nissan from basically like 2003 until like last year. This is the ultimate seat time car, and you really do need nothing to start drifting a 350Z. Next one we're going to talk about is the Hyundai Genesis. And before you say, ew, it's a Hyundai, yeah, I agree. But you got a bunch of options here. You got the 2.0 or the 3.8. You can get the base model with the small brakes or the Track with the Brembos. Pros and cons to either of them. Personally, I'd be going with the 3.8 with Brembos. Those are obviously going to be more expensive. The 2.0 is also great if you want those turbo noises, although probably a little less reliable. They're pretty cheap, probably about the same price as the Z, although we find them going for a little more oddly, and would definitely pick the Z over one of these. But either one's a good choice. Genesis is probably a more stylish car, and you do have a nicer interior, better creature comforts if that matters to you. The great part about these, like the Z, you need nothing to start driving. Get a model with an LSD, get a manual transmission, and go send it on track. All right, now here's the one if you're really on a budget. You're looking at the New Edge SN95 or S197 Mustang. These are kind of the ugly duckling Mustangs. Mustang guys in the comments, just fight me. The only cool one's the Terminator. I don't really care. You got V8 power. Even though it's kind of anemic V8 power, you got V8 power like 260 horsepower or something like that. Can the editors please correct me on that number? They're cheaper. There's no real drift tax on these. They're not super stylish. People don't really care for them all that much. You do have an LSD in a lot of the models. They've got a nice manual transmission. Like I said, you kind of got zero style going with one of these, but they're cheap. They're easy to learn in. Parts are plentiful. And I'm not trying to shit on the Mustang at all. I think it's a great option. It's just not going to get you the cool points that the Z or even the Genesis is going to get you. All right, so now you got E-chassis BMWs. The 36, probably not my first choice. You got a lot of issues with kind of general old car bullshit that you probably as a new driver don't want to put up with. The E46 is going to be your better choice. You reinforce that rear subframe. They are prone to cracking. You go ahead and send it and call it a day. Nice manual transmission, straight six, they sound great. They're pretty cheap, all things considered. You can pick one of these up for 1,500 bucks for like a pretty beat up auto car, all the way up to, 5, 6 grand for a nice one. You could even find yourself an SMG M3 if you like, masochism, and go ahead and, build that as your first drift car. Tons and tons of options in the E46 platform. Getting into the E90, don't pick a turbo car, it's never gonna run, so skip the 335i. M3, great, but we're not rich around here, you know what I'm saying? We're going for the budget drift car. Unless you find, a super clapped out E90 M3 and have money for rod bearings, realistically what we're looking for is the E90, E92, 328i. Same concepts, the E46, a little bit heavier, straight six, manual transmission, nice looking car, honorable mention of the 1 Series, same general concept. I don't really have to talk a lot about these. It's a BMW. You get in it, you put it in gear, you go drifting, spin it in little circles, wait for something to break, replace it, and go do it again. Last one, and my personal favorite, you guys guessed it, C5 and C6 Corvette. C5 is going to be your budget option, coming in around 5, 7, 10 grand, depending on where you're located. C6 a little more, 15, 20 grand. Either of them are great options. C6 is the best looking generation. C5 is the best bang for your buck. I don't need to tell you a lot about these guys. Sports car, like real actual sports cars. You got a manual transmission, T56, 6-speed. You have a V8 motor, LS1 all the way to LS3, depending on which one you pick. You got something around 360 to 420 horsepower, rear-wheel drive, manual, lightweight. Only downside here, the LS likes to get oil starved, so you're gonna have to do something with the oil starvation, and if you crash this thing, you're cooked, brother. They are all fiberglass, and they do not take those crashes very well, so if you crash this one, be prepared to spend a lot of money replacing parts. So which one's the best? Well, it's really your personal preference. If I had to pick one for a new driver, I would go with the 350Z or the C5 Corvette. They're perfect to get into, perfect to get some seat time. You need nothing, super reliable, super cheap to fix, which is gonna be really, really important in the second step. So, second part, we're looking at mods. This is the part I know you're really excited about. You got your brand new drift car, but you wanna tinker with it a little bit, you wanna make it cooler. Well, your number one mod, unfortunately, is seat time. Before doing anything else, get in that thing and go drive the piss out of it. If you don't know how to drive it, all the suspension and angle mods in the world won't do shit for you. Speaking of suspension mods though, we're gonna talk about coilovers. Coilovers are crucial, probably the first thing you should do to your drift car. Better handling, period, full stop. They handle better than your OEM suspension. Any of these cars you're buying are probably not a primo example, they're probably pretty beat up. OEM suspension is gonna be blown. Got better handling under weight transfer, which means that as the car transitions, you're not gonna have that body roll. The car is gonna stay level. Stiffer spring rates are gonna assist with that, and you can adjust the spring rates on your coilovers to dial in your specific suspension setup as you get more advanced. Better look, lowered is always best. Can't argue with it. Realistically, coilovers are almost required to progress in suspension setups. You get coilovers first, then you get the arms and the bushings and all that stuff that you want to do. Just go with the coilovers, skip the lowering springs. And as far as coilovers go, you don't need the big baller stuff. You do not need a set of KWV3s out of the gate. Great options for you that you can get over on our website, threepiece.us, BC Racing BR Series, or Silver's Neo Max 1. We also like the ISC suspension lineup. Any of these is going to run you about $1,000 and will last you well into your drifting career. Next one's a little less subjective, shifter and steering. You might like the OEM setup, that's great, skip this section of the video, move on to the next one. If you don't like it, find a shifter you do like. Could be a short shifter, could be lengthening through your shifter, could be an extension. You could stack, shifter extensions all the way up here, whatever you need to do, as long as you like driving it. You gotta be able to find that shifter as you're driving, pretty much intuitively. Next thing is steering setup. The OEM steering wheel is actually a safety hazard in many respects the minute you go on track. That airbag's going to deploy the minute you go off track. It's going to smack you in the face. I don't know about you, I don't like getting smacked in the face. Take that OEM steering wheel off, replace it with a steering setup of your choice. Entry-level drift car, looking at an NRG hub, NRG quick release, and probably an NRG wheel. NRG's got some great options. Some of them are SFI approved. If you're not into NRG, if you're one of those like, hey, I absolutely need Japanese parts in my car, Nardi personal keys, Vertex, whatever you like, throw it in your car, however you need style points. Big thing I'd recommend for you, find a bunch of steering wheels, borrow your buddies at an event, take off their NRG quick release, pop it on your car, try driving with a bunch of steering wheels and see which one you like the best. Okay, next up, your clutch. If you didn't buy an automatic transmission, I don't know why you'd buy an automatic transmission to drift, but if you didn't buy an automatic, you're gonna need a clutch. You're like, but Jake, my OEM clutch is in good shape. The previous seller said it only has 374,000 miles on it. Yeah, well, drifting abuses clutches. When you clutch kick, which means push in the clutch, rev up the gas, step off the clutch, you are essentially hot spotting your clutch. That OEM clutch is gonna start slipping faster than Joe Biden can slip down a set of stairs. However, don't overbuild your car, which is probably a common theme in this video. You don't need some crazy sprung or unsprung 6-puck, 1200 horsepower twin disc clutch. You're gonna be perfectly fine with the stage 2 or equivalent from the clutch brand of your choice. Just don't buy the Amazon clutches. Cooling. If you bought some of these cars, you're good out of the box. If you bought some of these other cars, like the BMWs, you're not good out of the box. Cooling mods are very, very simple. Replace anything plastic with something not plastic, so expansion tanks, radiators, any piece of plastic should not be in your engine bay. You're going to be sitting near limiter the entire lap, so you probably don't want to have something that's plastic, that's brittle, prone to cracking. Koyo-Rad's the OG here. If you're balling on a budget, Mishimoto copies Koyo-Rad, makes basically the same stuff. Either one, whichever one's going to get you, to your goal, whether that's style points or performance. Exhaust, honorable mention. You don't need it, but you want it. My personal preference is the tube, which is a tube of metal where you just cut off everything that deadens noise and you just put a tube there. This is a drift car. You don't need anything fancy. If you want something fancy, go buy a Tomei and brag to your friends on the internet about spending $1,200 for a tube. Okay, so you probably expected this one. Wheels and tires. These are the big boy modifications when it comes to drifting. Now, you might be like, Jake, my OEM wheels, they work well. They're wheels, they're round, you put a tire on them. Yeah, that's great. Realistically, OEM tire sizes, kind of poo-poo. You're gonna have a lot of like rollover on that OEM tire when you're running that 45 series. You want something a little more performance-oriented, a little stiffer sidewall. You're only gonna get that by going to a bigger diameter wheel. So, best choice here, lightweight, stylish, and cheap. Stylish being optional, lightweight and cheap not being optional. My personal preference, the Heritage Wheel Ebisu Mono C. Heritage just came out with these about 3-4 months ago. About $1,100 for a set in 18s. And you got a bunch of sizes, 18.8.5, 18.9.5, 18.11. You can run these on basically any drift car, run the 8.5 in front so you can get those angle mods taken care of, run the 9.5 in the rear, throw some 225s, 235s on that rear. You got cheap burners all day, you can go drifting forever. Other great brands for drifting, you're looking at like 969 with their TE37 reps. These are cheap, these are very, very usable. Oddhon makes some great options. You don't need gram lights. You don't need TE37s. People are gonna tell you like style matters and this and that and the other thing. When you're learning to drift, you're gonna fuck your wheels up. Get something cheap, get something usable, and get something you can get multiple of. Nothing worse than having to wait for your tires to be changed at a track day. Buy 3 fronts, 2 to use, 1 when you inevitably go off track, buy as many rears as you can afford. Realistically, you should budget a couple $1,000s for wheels, so if you buy something cheaper, you should be able to get, 8, 10, 12 wheels for about $2,000, $2,200. When it comes to tires, get something good in front. R compounds are great if you can swing it. If you can't, you get a nice grippy tire. In the rear, get something cheap. So, for example, we'd recommend Falcons in the front, Ironmans in the rear. You want your rear tires to be as cheap as possible. Used tires are great, but one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they get into drifting is they do it as cheap as possible. They get the cheapest rear wheels they can get, OEMs off other cars, whatever, and they buy as many used tires as possible. One of the hard things for you when you're learning is consistency. The wheel and tire setup, different wheel weights, different tire sizes, different tire profiles, different inflation levels are going to change the way the car feels under load. They're going to change the driving dynamics of the car. So what you want to do is you want to try to achieve as much consistency as possible so you can learn your skill set. Once you get good, yeah, go buy 55 OEM wheels and as many cheap tires as you can. When you're learning, probably spend a little bit more money to maintain that consistency that you want. Last thing on tire size and wheels, you don't need the widest wheel you can fit. Yes, your 350Z is very, very sick. Yes, you bought the over fender kit. Buy the 18 by 9.5. Don't buy the 1811. You don't have enough power to spin those 11s. It takes more throttle input and more clutch kicks to keep spinning those 11s, and you're going to spend more on tires on it. Buy the 9.5. Make your life easy. Learn to drift first, then graduate into the bigger wheels and the more style once you know what you're doing. So, got your car, got it modified, got your suspension, wheels, tires, exhaust, cooling mods, all that other stuff. I know you just bought the wheels and the suspension. I know you didn't do the maintenance. I know you. I do the same thing. How do you actually learn to drift? I'm not going to lie to you and say, just go to the track, because I know you're not going to. Best option, safest option, find a local skid pad. If you live in Southern California, we're very fortunate to have Apple Valley Speedway, which has a skid pad. It's like $30 or something. Editors, please pull it from their website and let people know how much it costs. Like $30, $40 to go on the skid pad. This is safe, controlled, and legal. Now, if you're not going to do that, which I know many of you are not going to do that, let's be practical here. Find a large, empty, open space, ideally private property that you own, and find somewhere safe. Don't go street drifting. You suck. You're not a good drifter at this point. If you go street drifting, you're endangering yourself and others. Don't do that. Find that nice, big, empty, open space. Get yourself a couple cones. That's how we're going to start. First thing you're going to do, put that cone down right smack dab in the middle of where you're going to be doing your drifting and learn how to do a donut. A donut is going to be drifting in a circle around that cone. There's 4 ways to initiate this. You've got power oversteer, which is turning the wheel and stepping on the gas. You've got a clutch kick, which is turning the wheel, pushing the clutch in, stepping on the gas, and stepping off the clutch. You've got a manji, which is not relevant here, basically transferring the weight of your car. And you've got handbrake, which is not an initiation that's relevant here either. Clutch in, pull the handbrake, turn the steering wheel once you have momentum. To start with, you're probably going to need to clutch kick to get a lower power car. Push that clutch in, rev it up, let off the clutch, turn the steering wheel, and start getting that donut going. Steer in the direction of the slide, and then use the throttle to continue steering the vehicle, and counter steer as needed. Counter steering meaning turning the steering wheel the other way to control the slide and keep yourself from spinning out. What you're going to want to do, steer into the direction of the slide, break the rear tires loose, counter steer meaning turn the steering wheel the opposite direction of the slide, and then use minor throttle and steering inputs to control the slide. Drifting is smooth. It's not hectic and frantic. The smoother you can be with throttle and steering inputs, the smoother it's going to be on the outcome. Once you can do a controlled donut around an object like a cone, time to move to the figure 8. This is going to teach you the basics of car control. The figure 8 is essentially a donut with a transition to another cone where you're going to do another donut and come back. Very similar principle. Essentially, as you make the turn around your first cone, you're going to keep steering in that direction. You're going to continue it through with throttle and steering inputs through that center of the two cones. You're going to transition it by essentially flicking the steering wheel 180 degrees the opposite direction. You're going to catch it, counter steer, and adjust throttle around the other cone. This is easier said than done, and I'm definitely not showing you guys how to do it in this video. There's lots and lots of videos on YouTube that can teach you how to do this with actual video instructions, but the donut and the figure eight is a great way to learn to start drifting. Once you know these fundamentals, now you can hit the track and not embarrass yourself. What do you need to do for your first track day? It's very, very simple. Make sure your car is well maintained. Make sure you got oil in there. Having oil in your engine is usually a good thing. Change your oil if it's old. Coolant, same concept. Pour some coolant in there. If you got water in there, pour some coolant in there. Your car's going to be getting abused on track. It's going to be getting hotter than usual. Make sure it stays nice and cool. Check your front tires. Make sure they're in good shape. If you've got cupping, flat spots, wires showing, etc., 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 your car's not going to handle predictably on track. You're going to want to fix those front tires before you get out there. Check your brakes. If you have a little oopsie going off track, you want to be able to stop. You also are going to use your brakes in certain initiations. Make sure you got decent brakes, decent brake pads, and some life on them. Nut and bolt check. This is a crucial one. You and your boys were in the garage until 3 a.m. the previous night crushing claws and putting those coilovers in, and you're pretty sure your homie torqued that lower bolt. You should probably check that. Make sure all your bolts are torqued down. Make sure you got a little Loctite on relevant bolts. Do a quick nut and bolt check on any part that you've modified before your track day. Bring your tools, bring a good SFI approved helmet, and you're good to go. Recognize you're going to suck at your first track day and just embrace it. You're not a Formula D driver. Don't be hitting those 80-mile-an-hour backy entries. Just focus on your fundamentals. Try not to go off track. Try not to hit anyone else and have a blast. So, in this video, I taught you what you need to know to start drifting. We went over the best platform to learn on, some common modifications that you need, and the actual fundamentals of driving the car. Now, you're ready to hit the track in your new drift car. Remember, if you need those wheels, the suspension, the tires, or anything else to modify your new drift car, the best place to get it is threepiece.us. Once you finish building that car, be sure to upload it to our gallery to help others build their own drift car.